We are on the Festival Daily Buzz. My name is John Wildman. I'm the editor-in-chief of FilmsGoneWild.com, here with my Bitch Talk teammates Angela Tabora and Erin Lim. On this segment, we're going to talk about an episodic series that is premiering here at Sundance, Murder in Bighorn. We have the directors, Razelle Benally and Matthew Galkin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, now again, this is a series that film festivals have expanded their programming to include a project like this. It makes it tough on people like us because normally a reviewer would watch one episode, but with this, I wanted to keep going and keep watching and keep watching because this is such an important subject that you two of you broach on this. But one of you please introduce our audience to it. They've not seen this as yet, so introduce us to Murder in Bighorn.
Murder in Bighorn is an episodic series that investigates a collection of missing and potentially murdered. Sorry, can I start that again?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
How you do it?
It's early. Go.
So Murder in Bighorn is a 3-part doc series, and it investigates the possible murders and disappearances of a group of Native American women in rural Montana, specifically on the Lame Deer, Northern Cheyenne, and in Crow Agency on the Crow reservations.
Yeah, well, I want to get into obviously these disappearances, but I love how the film or the series really tackles if you want to address a problem, address its roots and the creation of these reservations in the first place. So can you talk about digging into the history of reservations and the long line of breaking of the Native American spirit?
So growing up, I was born off the reservation, but both my parents both went to boarding school and grew up on the reservation. And so I grew up knowing who I was, where my family came from. We would go back all throughout the year for different functions, whether it was funerals or celebrations. We were always going back and forth between the Pine Ridge Indian reservations and the Navajo reservation in Arizona. And so knowing the history through my parents' lens and taking upon myself to read books, watch as much as I can, documentary-wise when I was a young child. One of my favorite docs was The Spirit of Crazy Horse, though. It was on PBS, and we had the videotape of it, and I would watch it pretty much once a week. And it's ingrained in you, and there's, no matter where you come from, where you're born, where you live, there's this inherent sense of indigeneity that exists within you. And so now that I think about it when I'm older, I often wonder if that's generational trauma, if that's my bloodline's memory of violence. And so I can't really speak too much from an outsider's perspective of our own history, but I can only speak to my own lived experience as a Native woman, a brown woman who has constantly known of the fears of going missing or being murdered. And so when we're talking about our series, Murder in Bighorn, we really had to investigate the roots, and we really wanted the greater audiences to understand that this isn't a single perpetrator. It's not a mystery, that this started with contact with European settlers, and the impacts of colonization is very much real and exists in our current generation.
I'm going to speak for myself and not my colleagues here, but while I was watching the episodic, there was something in me and a sick feeling in my stomach that maybe the local police could be involved in some way in most of the cases, just because the patterns were similar. Is that something that's discussed internally by the Indigenous community at all, or am I just going off the rails?
I mean, we all have our own perception of what could be going on in our communities. I think a lot of us, because we do live in such small, tight-knit communities, that it's hard to be public and say certain things. Mm-hmm. And so those conversations are had, and the reality is we just don't know. And we're constantly wondering why our cases aren't taken seriously, aren't investigated, and why law enforcement is constantly so negligent. And, you know, it really makes me wonder, you know, if we're not getting proper justice, then who's to say that other places aren't getting proper justice? So that's the kind of link that I want people to sort of connect the dots. If it's happening to us, then it can very easily happen to other marginalized communities and beyond.
I want to start this question by praising both of you for the skill with which different disparate aspects of storytelling are utilized in here so well. Because, you know, again, when you talk about the history, you know, we're our country, we've got a conservative faction that doesn't want people to know the history that you are laying out in here, because they don't want something that'll make them feel bad, and they should, because that history is heartbreaking when you know it, and then, you know, the neglect and of brown women that disappear and you know, and are trafficked, you know, by police authorities, local authorities. I mean, that's well documented, and yet still nothing's being done. So you have that, and then on top of it, you kind of have a procedural, which of course, that entertainment-wise, everyone loves procedural. So you're balancing three aspects that you could make separate films on all three, and yet you've dovetailed them to show how they all intersect. And what I would love for both of you to talk about, because that's not easy, and you did with this series very, very well. So talk about the challenges of that and how you went about it.
I mean, the origins of this project is that Showtime, who is a network that I have a years-long relationship with, brought this very general idea to me. They were interested in exploring this crisis. I didn't know anything about MMIW at all. I'm a non-native filmmaker. I knew instantly that I needed to bring in a partner that was native to help me, because, you know, I feel like I know how to make sort of large commercial documentaries, but I wanted this to be as authentic as possible. So I brought in Razelle, and, you know, we kind of set out to make, on its surface, a true crime doc series, but thinking of it more as a bait and switch than anything else. You know, we want people to watch this. We want this to reach the absolute widest audience possible. So to utilize the tropes of true crime documentaries, you know, so we set about, we picked specific cases, specifically in Bighorn County, because there is such a large concentration of missing and murdered cases. These families whose daughters had either gone missing or been murdered were some of the sort of key families to start pushing for advocacy for this issue, and sort of brought it to a national stage. It was a lot through, you know, Henny Scott's case and Case Sarah Stops Pretty Places case and Selena Not Afraid's case. Their family members were incredibly vocal about this and really brought it to national attention. So in the sort of true crime vein, it's challenging for us. It's not our job to solve crimes. That's not what we do. You know, our job is to shine a light, tell these stories, raise awareness, you know, make them as visible as possible. So we can only take the true crime aspect of it so far, because there has been no investigations into these cases. We don't have access. You know, we have been pounding down the door of the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office for 2 years now. The FBI doesn't talk to us. The BIA doesn't talk to us. So there's only so far we can go. We can talk to everyone else that is involved, or at least try to. So, you know, look, if you're looking for a true crime payoff, this is not the series for you. But, you know, ultimately what was infinitely more important, not that solving these cases isn't important, but for us, the crime with a capital C becomes the history. It's so that you know, which is the balance we try to hold for the series is you know, the historical reasons why all of these factors sort of coalesce into a perfect storm in these cases, why these women were put in such vulnerable situations to begin with.
To expand also on what you're saying, Matthew, is, you know, we aren't investigators. We're not trained police. We're not, you know, PI. We're just filmmakers. So all we can do sometimes, well, I should say this. It feels like sometimes all we can do is help elevate the visibility of these cases, these possible crimes, and really give the relatives and these families a voice and a platform about their loved one's case, because so oftentimes they're just ignored and they're screaming into a vacuum, frustrated, angry. They're on the steps of the courthouses, they're advocating, they're putting themselves on the front lines because they want some sort of justice, and we're looking for accountability.
And you know, we partnered with the NIWRC, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, specifically because, you know, it's almost like a baton pass. We can take this so far, but to have an organization that advocates for the families, that provides resources for Indigenous women, you know, we can advocate, but it's by partnering with them, we raise the visibility of their organization. So hopefully they can, you know, get this out even wider than SHPM can.
Well, again, like I said, you know, watching this, it's absolutely heartbreaking when we meet the families, and it's infuriating every single shot of a police cruiser or the front of that office, knowing that nobody's talking to you, and then you get a letter from John Tester saying that he's upset or irritated, and you go, really? That's what we get? That's what we get after? And yet, again, your delivery system of the true crime aspect, like I said, is incredibly effective. I hope, like I said, that Showtime's viewings go up in a major way watching this damn thing, and like I said, congratulations on a really well done job.
Thank you.
Again, we've been talking about Murder in Bighorn, a 3-part doc series that is premiering at Sundance. We've been talking to the directors, Razelle Benally and Matthew Galkin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Click.
I'm obviously a little bit passionate about that.
Thank you.
I wanted to get into Michael Little Coyote too.
Oh,
amazing.
sweetheart.
Just my favorite
He's incredible.
person.
Yes.
I mean, you want to know what defund the police looks like? People like that, making things happen.
Yeah.
Actually, part of the community.
Yes, taking matters into their own hands.
Yeah,
provide
and
security.
but like a trusted part of the community, and
He's such an eloquent guy. Like, it was incredible.
yeah,
We
it's
just he saw us filming on the main street in Lame Deer, and he just sort of walked over and said, like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?"
that's how you met.
Sort of like, "I would like to
Yeah.
talk to you." And that was about a 45-minute sort of on the street interview. It was incredible.
Wow.
We said we asked very few questions. He just had a lot to say, and he's incredibly eloquent.
Yeah, and a lot of times community members are, you know, very, very open, especially because Ivy and I were there as, you know, other Native peeps. It's just the natural conversation. Oh, what are you guys doing? Where are you from? And so it felt very natural and organic to, you know, to visit Crow and to make new friends, and, you know, and I consider these people family. So you spend 2 years on a project like this, and you can't help but, you know, want to do the best you can for them.
Well, you did well by them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
No,
we'd
thank
love to
you.
do a photo
Yeah.
with you.